Folks, how y'all doing? This is CCL Sports Cards. In today's episode, I'm going to tell you about who may just be the next sleeper for the Toronto Blue Jays. Now, before your eyes roll into the back of your head and like, oh my God, the Blue Jays, that's so boring. I am going to tell you how we identify sleepers at CCL Sports Cards so you can make even more money, or I say potentially make more money in the hobby. So keep that tape rolling. Folks, thanks for sticking with me. I am your host, Christopher Davies. Now, well, I think it's important to have cards in your collection, especially if you want to make money in sports cards over the longer term. You should have guys like Mookie Betts or Bryce Harper, the guys you see that I showcase on my shelf, or Pete Alonso, people like that, if you want to make money in the hobby longer term. But what makes the hobby fun? Let's be fair, guys. It's prospecting. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Now, I'm going to identify for you who I think is one of the biggest sleepers in the Toronto Blue Jays organization and will provide probably some tremendous upside down the path. But let's back up a little bit. I want to start off by talking about how we identify prospects. We're going to talk about Thomas Saggese, who is all the rage lately. And as if you watch some of my recent episodes, you know we've begun to sort of unwind that position in Thomas Saggese. But we're going to back up to 2021 when we first identified Saggese and started talking about buying his cards on the channel. What I'd like to do before we start to buy the cards is sort of find a reasonable comparison for somebody like Saggese or any prospect. And back then, we used Evan Carter as sort of our baseline. Now, we can agree that Saggese's cards have risen in price or value, and they haven't reached like Evan Carter-like levels. But it was a fair comparison because age-wise, they were about the same. They were at the same level, and believe it or not, their stats were fairly similar. And we talked about this a couple of years ago, and even up until a year ago before we started to not purchase any more Saggese. Back in 2021, Saggese was not even a ranked prospect on MLB.com. In 2022, in the top 30 for the Rangers, he barely made the cut at 28, and his cards were still dirt cheap. You could get base autos for like $5. What's really important here is that some people who I have a great deal of respect for in terms of who prospect in baseball, I asked their opinion on Thomas Saggese. And they told me, oh, don't bother, buy Evan Carter, blah, blah, blah. But for myself, Evan Carter kind of fits the pattern. And some of our viewers have noticed this, that a prospect like Evan Carter, their values go to meteoric levels as they get better and better. And we all know how this generally ends. Not all the time, but most of the time. Evan Carter is going to debut. His cards are going to maybe go bananas for a couple of weeks. And then really no matter how he produces, his cards are going to fall. So back in the day, let's say an Evan Carter base auto was going for $100. Saggese was $5. So I like Saggese because I could make 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times 10x. Now, people told me to stay away from Saggese even though we had a really low entry point because he struck out too much. Or I actually had one person tell me it's because his first Bowman Chrome card looked ridiculous, which I think is just silly. I get that they're pieces of art and they have to look good, but let's be fair. A player's card is sort of tied to their production, yeah? So we began to stock up on Saggese, and the rest is history. Right now, I think he's ranked 8th or 9th. He got traded to the St. Louis Cardinals. His line, you can see it there on the screen. It is absolutely bananas. He was at like 24 home runs. He's hitting 321. His OPS is over 900. And while we could have probably made more money on Saggese, because we were in at such low levels, we got to sell on the way up before everybody else is trying to get out. And I really do hope, as I've said, the people who bought the cards are actually going to make even more money, but it was time for us to leave. Which brings me to today's sleeper for the Toronto Blue Jays. I am talking about none other than Miguel Geraldo, second baseman currently playing in Double-A for the New Hampshire Fisher Cats. And he's been there all season. Now, for the comparison part of this, the best comparison I could find in the Blue Jays organization, again, apples to apples, is a prospect named Leonardo Jimenez. They both actually happen to be in 2019 Bowman Chrome, which made it even cooler. They're both 22 years old, although Miguel Geraldo does turn 23 tomorrow, September 5th, which by the time this episode airs, it's going to be his birthday. So happy birthday to Miguel Geraldo. But back to our comparison. Right now, you can pick up a Miguel Geraldo 2019 Bowman Chrome Auto. You ready for this? For about $3 on eBay. And by comparison, Jimenez's sell for as little as $10, which right there, he's 3 times cheaper. Now, the interesting part is this. Again, they're both middle infielders. They both play for the Blue Jays. We can say they're kind of the same age because both will be 23 next season as Jimenez celebrates his birthday next spring. But take a look at their stat lines. This year at AA, Miguel Giraldo has had 317 at-bats. He's hit .278 with 12 home runs, 54 RBIs, 16 steals, and an OPS just under 800 at the time of this recording. Now, his strikeout to walk ratio is 26 to 109 Ks, so it's about 5 to 1. That is a little bit high. But quite frankly, a high strikeout rate doesn't really scare me as long as it remains consistent through the minors, because I've heard these arguments about Sajize and Jordan Westburg and all these guys. Well, they strike out too much. Well, Jordan Westburg is holding his own in his first season in the majors with his OPS being over 700. But back to the comparison. Leonardo Jimenez, who is 22 years old and is ranked number 6th in the Blue Jays organization as per MLB.com for 2023. He was number 5 last year and number 13 in 2021. And I'll talk about Miguel Giraldo's rankings in a moment, but his stats, Leo Jimenez's stats, he was recently promoted to AAA, but spent most of his season in AA. Jimenez is 22. He's had 299 at-bats. He's hit .284 with 8 home runs, 44 RBIs, 8 stolen bases, and an OPS of 803. And I will tip my cap to Leo. He's got 34 walks to 55 Ks, so it looks like he has much better plate discipline. Now, if you got to look at that side-by-side comparison that was on the screen, we can all agree that Leo Jimenez does have a better strikeout to walk ratio. He's hitting marginally better. But we as collectors and baseball fans absolutely know that nobody cares what your average is unless your name is Ichiro Suzuki or Tony Gwynn. People in the hobby love homers. And right now, Miguel Giraldo has more home runs than Leo Jimenez. He also has better wheels. Now, the other interesting part is Miguel Giraldo, he's not even a ranked prospect. In 2021, he was number 9 for the Blue Jays as per MLB.com. In 2022, he was number 12. This year, he doesn't even have a rank. So what that tells us is basically people are paying more for his cards because he's a ranked prospect. And while that's not necessarily incorrect, I am talking about getting into sleepers at the very bottom. And that's what we're doing here with Giraldo. He's not even ranked. And let's be fair here. Scouts get it wrong all the time. So in summary, we can basically say, if we're talking about strictly for production for the players, the edge clearly goes to Giraldo, and all things otherwise are equal. Age, where they play in the system, how they've... It's all the same. But people are paying 3 times as much for Leo Jimenez's Bowman Chrome autos. And what we've done here is show you how you can identify guys in your system who you can make money on. Again, Sajize wasn't even a ranked prospect, and Jordan Westbrook wasn't even on anybody's radar in the first couple of years. It was all about Kjerstad before he got hurt. So, in summary, what we've done here with Miguel Giraldo is we've identified our downside, which is virtually nothing. I mean, you can see the sales on eBay. We've been picking up Miguel Giraldo cards for next to nothing. We got a gold PSA 10 for $120. There's a blue we paid $50 for, a bunch of base autos, BGS 95s for $15. My point is, our downside is capped. He's 22 years old, and when Miguel Giraldo does become a ranked prospect, we may see a little bit of a bump. And I can assure you, if he makes the show and performs well, say like Davis Schneider, who's all the rage right now for Blue Jay fans, you could see a meteoric rise in the value of his cards. So it's safe to say you can put a little bit of money into Miguel Giraldo, not lose your shirt, and continue to have fun prospecting. Folks, thank you so much for joining me on this magic carpet ride. Again, being in prospecting, that is what makes baseball card collecting fun to me. I mean, owning guys like Mookie Betts and Bryce Harper, it's pretty much a sure thing, but it's kind of like watching paint dry, so keep on prospecting. Now, don't forget to hit that subscribe icon so you know when content like this drops. I appreciate all of you and want to wish you an incredible week. Thank you so much.